Good evening, everyone. This is Kaleem Joy with Natural Childbirth 101. I'm a licensed midwife and a pediatric massage therapist and a certified professional midwife. And each Wednesday night, I have an opportunity to come on and visit with many of you and talk about topics relating to pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, parenting, life, and whatever else seems to strike our fancy at the time. So I want to welcome everybody tonight. We have an opportunity to chat about sugar, something that we all know and love and we have a good time with, depending on whether we're baking things or we're having pancakes. And right now with this, wonderful quarantine type thing, we tend to be perhaps making more things at home, cookies and cakes and all that kind of good stuff. And so I hope you've enjoyed something delicious, but tonight we're going to talk about how that relates to pregnancy. I've had several of you asking about these types of questions, so I thought, well, it's a good time to do that on one of our lives. Now, if you, after we get done, please feel free to share this. I always love it to go out to more people. That's why I do them, is to give more information out to the public so they have more ability to understand their own care, help to guide their friends or family, and to just have more education, right? All right, so when we think about sugar in pregnancy, so when you're pregnant, obviously your body is going to eat well, and you're going to not only grow you to some extent, your organs probably enlarge a little bit, and your body definitely expands and grows, but you're growing a new human being, right? That's just so mind-boggling, isn't it? That you're growing a new human being inside of you, and from the time that they're very tiny, they start asking a lot, don't they? Especially from about 6 weeks. You do start getting a bit of fatigue. Many times you have an upset tummy, the throw up starts, and there's a whole myriad of things that remind you that yes, you are pregnant and that something is going on in your body, even though your body's shape may not have changed. If anything, you lose a little weight. Well, as the pregnancy advances and as the baby grows, those do settle down. Now, there are some people who unfortunately have a lot of upset tummies for quite a while in pregnancy. And hopefully very few of you on here have that issue, but if you do, my heart goes out to you. That is not any fun. So as the baby is growing, so is the placenta. The placenta is the baby's, of course, ecosystem of how their wonderful water gets made in there, as well as how they pee, how they breathe, and some of their fluid happens in their lungs. And part of what happens with the placenta is there is a hormone called, very wisely called, which some things are not, it's called human placental lactogen. And what that hormone does is its job is to make sure that all the glucose that's running around in the body doesn't get absorbed by the mother, that there is plenty for the baby. And so in very simplistic terms, that's what it does. And there are times in the pregnancy, usually within 28 to 32 weeks, but even earlier than that sometimes, that hormone grows because the placenta grows and the baby goes through this growth spurt. So that human placental lactogen is higher. And when that occurs, that means that there's more glucose running around and more opportunity for that glucose to go to the baby. Now, this is all fine and good, unless your body is having a hard time or someone else's body that you know is having a hard time being able to handle their sugars. So sugar in the body is handled, being able through digestion, but insulin, right? Insulin is in the pancreas, and the pancreas is working hard to not only throw out good digestive juices to you, but also insulin to help moderate your blood sugar depending on what you've eaten. If you eat something that's really sugary, there's going to be a bigger amount of insulin that's going to help regulate that and keep it in balance. So what happens is, it used to be that right around 28 weeks was when they would do what's called a glucose tolerance test, or a GTT. And they did this test by asking you to drink 50 grams of sugar load, which basically was a very syrupy sort of 7-Up or Coke type of thing. And then an hour later, they would check your blood sugar. And this was meant to challenge, right? Challenge your body that says, if we give you a big bolus of sugar, what can your body do to help regulate itself? And so when they would take that 1 hour blood sugar, it needed to be below 140. That was the magic number. And if it was below 140, then things were considered good, unless symptoms showed up that made them go looking for something else. And everybody across the board would have that done in a hospital setting, not always in a midwifery setting, however. So today, they've upped that to a 75 gram load, and they're still within the 135 to 140, depending on what your doctor likes to look at. Many of them are getting down closer to 135. Now, these numbers are numbers that are not exclusive to pregnancy. These are numbers that are used in non-pregnant. So what would be the numbers we would be using in pregnancy? Good question, right? I know that's going through your mind. Well, what about in pregnancy? So these are the numbers that everybody works with. And once there is a diagnosis, then the treatment for it in the standard system is through diet. So they send you to diet school, basically, right? How to eat, how to moderate, how to eat the right things, and how to keep your blood sugar normal. They also may have you check blood sugars at home. And if need be, and they can't be monitored properly, then they put you on either metformin or on insulin, and then you're high risk, and then you have a lot more monitoring for you and the baby, and we're going to cover more of that in a few minutes. And your delivery may be different because they want to make sure that you're not having too big a baby, that the baby is not being affected by having so much glucose that it grows overly in amount, that it collects a lot of fluid, and there can be, problematic symptoms to that if it's really a problem. Okay, so now let's go back to the testing again. So in midwifery, any midwives, if they have lab privileges, depending on where you live and what state or country you're in, they have the opportunity to send you for these labs, and some midwives do. Some midwives would prefer to have that information. Many midwives would prefer that we look at your diet and have you do some monitoring at home. And that means that you do much like a diabetic, where you test your blood sugar when you first get up in the morning. You test it an hour after you eat breakfast, an hour after lunch, and an hour after dinner. And over the course of about 3 to 5 days and recording your diet, a midwife can look at that and say, all right, things look well. Your normal daily activities seem to be looking that your blood sugars are within normal ranges and that things look well, unless symptoms come up to warrant wanting to look further. So in midwifery practice or in medical practice, also there's a test called a hemoglobin A1C. Now that's usually done with your initial labs most of the time. You may or may not have ever known it was even done, but you can ask. And you can either ask for the test or you can ask if your physician or midwife did that. Now a hemoglobin A1C is meant to look at how has your body been doing at regulating blood sugar for the last 3 months. So it's meant to be a gauge over time rather than the isolated time that you're in at that current moment with blood sugar, right? All right, and so the magic numbers are 5.8 or less. That's what they want to see, 5.8 or less on a hemoglobin A1C. You can even get hemoglobin A1C little monitors you can have at home. And many are going to those over the blood sugar ones. They feel like they're more accurate. So there's always change, isn't there? All right, so in 1971, I want to say 71, gestational diabetes became a diagnosis. Up until that point, there was a lot of, should we do this, should we do that, etc. And then the medical establishment decided that they would create that as a diagnosis. They had not, in the research, proven that it was diagnosable, but it became a diagnosis. And of course, now if you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes, insurance can be billed for a whole lot more as well, because now you have to be monitored more, right? Okay. So how do you, how home monitoring, being able to have like a glucose tolerance test without drinking one of those crazy syrupy things. If any of you have ever had that, you know it's not really the most pleasant thing. And frankly, I've done it once in my life where I've had that lovely syrupy thing. And for me, I did the testing to look at my adrenals and my blood sugar based on that. And boy, I hit bottom after that, throwing that all in my body. So I'm not really sure how all of you have done it, those of you who have had glucose tolerance tests before. So there is also what is called the fresh test. I have never ordered it myself. It's newer. Many midwives and birth centers are using this instead of sending you to the lab and getting what they have. And the fresh test is a healthy form of a sugar load, if you will, that you can drink, and then you stay in your midwife's office for an hour, and then they take your blood sugar after an hour and see what it is, and there you are, and you're done if everything's good. Diet is probably the most important part of either preventing that from becoming high or dealing with it if it has come up high. And let's say it's just marginally high, 141, right? Just barely over the limit, or 136. Well, what it means is that it's up there in the upper limits, and it needs to be addressed within you to take control over your diet. Now, some say, oh, I've done that and it's so depressing because I can't eat anything and I feel like, my family eats and I can't. Well, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is if your body during pregnancy, which it usually will show us a weak link, if your body is showing a weak link, it's time to take and look at it, because pregnancy will show it and it will show up again later in life. So now's the best time. Yes, I will go over supplements. Now is the best time when you are in pregnancy, because now it's an important part of keeping everything normal, if you will, to take responsibility over it and say, okay, how can I eat better so that my body is not stressed and that my baby grows appropriately, and how can I take control over that and still feel like I have a little bit of wiggle room? So what I tell families is cereal is the number one kicker, because most people run for cereal at night. And if you will eliminate the bowls of cereal for first thing, and for some, I will say to them, no pasta, rice, breads, cereals, and they'll say, well, what am I supposed to eat? And I say, well, it's time to learn about a paleo or a Whole30 diet. And that's about eating lots of good fats and vegetables and protein and a moderate amount of fruit. And you learn that the fruits you eat need to be like sour apples or berries. You need to be aware of the fact that some are very sugary, and those have to be eaten sparingly, okay? And I always say to all of them, if you'll just do this, because I know that a birth giver says to me, I don't feel good. I'm tired all the time. I can't get any energy. I feel like, and I keep getting a recurrent yeast infection. And these are symptoms of perhaps a glucose that needs to be helped during the pregnancy, because the pregnancy is putting more stress on the body, and the body says it's not working really well for me. So being able to do a Whole30 or a paleo diet, which means you eat lots of good quality protein, right? And now a Whole30 doesn't put in a lot of dairy, and I'm okay with cottage cheese and Greek yogurts. Those are all great to have, and I encourage you to use those as well. Cheese is okay. Just don't go overboard on the cheese. That can get to be too much too. And having good fats, coconut oil, good olive oil, avocados, right? Because we know when we have appropriate fat in the diet that it helps the blood sugar to regulate better. So it's important to have those things. I do, after they get things regulated a little better, I say, okay, now I want you to put some sprouted bread in your diet, because sprouted bread is a whole grain and it tends to metabolize differently. And if they don't feel good on it, then I say, don't eat it then, you know? So those are some of the foods that need to be done. And once they get it regulated after a week or two, then I say, all right, one night a week, have whatever you want, you know, as far as a dessert. And it doesn't take very long before they go, oh, I felt horrible after eating that. I said, well, but you know you can. And if you don't want that, let's find a substitute for it. Because you realize very quickly how much better you feel if you're having a little bit of sugar problems when you change the diet. Okay, so now on supplements, all right? Chromium is one that can be used when you know you're having blood sugar problems. I wouldn't take it unless you know you're having blood sugar problems, because you don't want it to, you know, regulate it too well, right? Okay, so chromium is one. I like what's called Pancreas Support by Western Botanicals. This is a herb company that we've been using for years, almost since it first started back well over 20 years ago. Western Botanicals, they're in South Fork, Utah, someplace in Utah, and you can order directly from them. Many health food stores carry their products under the health food store's name brand, and you can always ask. And I like the Pancreas Support. That one has done a really good job of just supporting some of the marginal ones that come in and out. In and out meaning in and out of our practice that we seem to see. And usually it means they've had a larger baby, and we're kind of looking at, okay, we had this big a baby, let's not go for a bigger baby. So let's really give you the tools to really moderate what you need to be eating. Lots of good eggs and meats and chickens and fish. And if you're a vegetarian, then you have to make sure that you're getting tons of protein, and moderate some of the things like corn, definitely soy. Watch your soy. So Pancreas Support, yes, and a good B complex vitamin. Now, many of your prenatals are wonderful. Sometimes if you add an extra B, if you're having sugar problems, it also will help to regulate them better, and you'll see your energy come back up and you'll feel better. Another one that you should be taking anyway is vitamin C, having 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day, and vitamin E, you can take 800 units a day, okay? Those are just supportive as well. Let's see, what else have I got down here? Vitamin D3, believe it or not, has some to do with sugar metabolism, and if you're deficient in it, adding that in can also be a help, all right? So when you look at the diet, and you're monitoring the diet, you add some supplements. If you've already seen that your sugar levels are high, these are things that can help you begin to bring the pregnancy back into normal. Now, I did a live, I don't know, a few months back, and it was on conditions. Once you've solved the condition, do you still have the condition? And my deal is no. Well, with gestational, you may not have been diagnosed as gestational diabetic, but you might have had enough symptoms to suspect that that would be a diagnosis. And the key is what? Get on the right diet track, get on some supplements, and keep it regulated, because you should be able to feel reasonably good. If you've got a few kids, you're going to feel tired because you've got lots you're doing, right? But you don't need it to be because your sugar levels are unregulated. Now, I have had some. Yes, vitamin C, a B complex, and vitamin D3. And the other one was Pancreas Support by Western Botanicals. Thank you for asking, because I'm sure there were plenty that also were asking. Okay, let's see. Let's make sure we get everybody down here too. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What'd we do? Hold on. Hold on, there we go. There we go, we're back. Yeah, the new Facebook Live is a little tricky to understand for me, but I'll get there. All right, back to what we were at. So being able to utilize those supplements are helpful. 500 to 1,000 of vitamin C. As far as D3, I like 1,000 units. If you're deficient, you're going to need up to 5,000 units. And remember, it needs to be with K1 and K2 so that as you absorb calcium, it knows where to put it. And it doesn't put it in places you don't want, like your kidneys or your gallbladder, or even in your gums. People get little spurs in their gums if it's getting absorbed the wrong place. All right. Now, some of the risks that could go on is you may have genetic history. Now, if you come from a lineup that people are already diabetic, either on oral or insulin, then there may be some genetic predispositions going on there, and you're going to have to address whether that is something that you need to look at. I find also that sometimes it's hypoglycemia that you're dealing with at this point because it hasn't gone to the diabetic side of it, and you have a lot of low blood sugar. And what that usually means to me is that the adrenals need to be strengthened, but on low blood sugar, it means you need to eat frequently. Don't let your body go a long time, because if you do that and you go a long time and then you eat, you get this huge bolus of insulin, which almost does too much, and it drops your blood sugar, which makes you feel lousy. So you want to keep a good, constant little bit. Now, I don't mean eating meals every few hours. I mean eating little snacks, half an apple with a little peanut butter, a little slice of cheese and meat rolled up with it. Some nut butter in lettuce. I love that. Have you ever had a peanut butter or an almond butter and lettuce sandwich in lettuce? Try it. It's really quite fun. All right. So you want to understand your genetic history going on. If you've had larger babies, and we've talked about that before, but if you have babies that are 10 pounds and over, it's something to look at in subsequent pregnancies and make sure that you're handling whatever those nutrition things need to be. Now, sometimes that's genetics, and sometimes that's just the size babies that you have, and that's fine. But we sometimes will see where it's an 8-pounder, then a 9-pounder, then a 10-pounder, then an 11-pounder, and heaven forbid we want to get to the 12 pounds, right? And it's not like we're worried you can get them out. It's just it's a lot more stress on your body, and it's also perhaps more risk on the baby, depending on the situation, right? Okay, so let's see. The signs and symptoms, as I said, a yeast infection, not always the sign of gestational. Don't go there with that. But it's one of the symptoms of something that keeps recurring all the time. Some women have them because it's just pregnancy, because your pH changes, all right? So we have to kind of say a yeast infection of its own right is not that. But sometimes if we're adding all the pieces up, it can be. So a yeast infection, having fatigue, and usually you just don't feel good. You get colds constantly or sick constantly. You've got a baby that's growing large for dates. Maybe you have too much water. So it's kind of like putting a picture together that happens with that. Now, I get that the hope is not having to put that picture together by diagnosing everybody as to whether they are or they aren't gestational. But I don't think that one test then says, oh, you're not gestational. Okay, I don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, that's not the truth. We want to look at you as an individual each time, each situation, and be able to help that health to be good and beneficial for you and the baby the entire pregnancy. Because why? One, we want the pregnancy to be healthy. We want the baby to be healthy. But the next part is whether you're delivering in a hospital, a home, or a birth center, we want the birth to go well, right? Because everybody wants a happy, healthy birth giver and baby. That's where you want that birth to go well, and the postpartum. And when you have a baby who is growing wonderfully well, but you've had some gestational diabetes issues going on, if you're delivering in a hospital, they may want to induce you early. And that's because they don't want the baby getting big, because they worry that there will be a risk of the baby being able to come out, that the baby won't do well, and etc. The other thing is there may be an induction. Inductions are no fun if any of you have had them. The other thing is they don't want you to go past your date, so then induction comes back. If everything's going well and you go into labor on your own, would you treat a yeast infection? Yes, I would definitely treat a yeast infection. And I would treat a yeast infection usually with hydrogen peroxide and water rinses first. Sometimes we go to putting a garlic clove up in there at night. And if that's not working, then we go straight to monostat. It's like, let's try the natural. If it's not working, let's go. And probiotics, lots of good probiotics, and letting the sugar go down in the diet so that the yeast doesn't have as much to grow on. I'm going to come back to all your questions. Just keep them coming in and we'll go back to them. Let's see. I was on a train of thought here. Let me think what that was. So babies, after they're born, in a hospital setting, if you have a diagnosis of gestational diabetes, or if you have a baby that's over 8 pounds 13, or in some hospitals 8 pounds 9, they're going to want to do blood sugar checks on your baby every 15 minutes for an hour, every 30 minutes for another hour, and once an hour for 2 times or for 4 times, depending on the facility's policies. So that's a lot of extra stuff on your baby. Now, I would say, gosh, 3/4 of the babies in our practice are at least 8 pounds 13 and above. They're nice, healthy babies, and they're not gestational. They're just growing really well. We have 7-pounders, we have 6-pounders, but most babies are 8.5 to 10 pounds. So when you want to avoid having to have your baby have that going on, there's a couple of things that need to be solved with that. One, the solution to low blood sugar is what? Feed the baby, right? If you feed the baby, you get the baby on breast and the baby starts suckling, you might choose to say, I understand you need a blood sugar check. I'm happy to have one, but I want to feed the baby first and then you can do it. And they'll say, no, we want the blood sugar first. I'm like, why? What point? Because if you have a blood sugar before the baby goes on, whatever it is, the nursing is going to help it. And the other thing too, if you've had bigger babies or if you've had gestational diabetes as a diagnosis, try and get even some drops of colostrum in the last month. Get yourself some little 1 cc syringes and collect the colostrum, put it in the freezer and take it with you to the hospital, because that way you can give the baby a bolus and then put the baby on breast. And that helps that blood sugar come up and say, I'm happy to have you do 1 blood sugar in 30 minutes after I've nursed. And if the baby is still low, then we'll entertain the idea of having another blood sugar check another 30 minutes after. But to do that many blood sugar checks every 15 minutes just seems kind of obsessive to me. When is it really necessary? Now, if you're on insulin, that may be necessary. That baby has had a very different ride and is now needing to handle its own sugars and may need more monitoring, okay? But I'm talking about just a simple diagnosis, and that's it. Then you want to be able to know. Now, here's the signs and symptoms of a baby who's not doing well and their blood sugar is low. They get jittery, meaning they get jittery, right? And they can't maintain their temperature. They seem to, no matter what you do, their temperature can't maintain because their blood sugar is not there to maintain it. So those are 2 things. Lethargy, they're just, too sleepy. That's a blood sugar issue. Okay, so take some of that colostrum or some of the donated milk. Maybe you take donated breast milk with you and you give the baby a cc, get it to suck, and give the baby a cc of milk. My foot's bugging my camera. cc of milk or colostrum, and let that blood sugar come back up again. And that way you have a baby that's getting what it needs, okay? You're saying, I'm going to nurse the baby, but I'm also going to give the baby extra. And that way, baby does better, and there's less sequelae of things that'll be done. Now, if baby's being born at home or in a birth center, midwives are usually pretty good about watching for signs and symptoms and not needing to have blood tests. And the key is you put a baby to breast, and when the baby's nursing, the baby's blood sugar goes up very nicely. Colostrum is a very concentrated sugar that's there, and it's meant to help them to regulate that blood sugar very well. So talk to your care providers about it. Be able to work with those things if you need to, and know that if you haven't even had a diagnosis of gestational diabetes, if your baby is over that weight, they're going to treat the baby as if it has. So you want to be a good advocate, because it may mean that the baby is just normal, that it has no blood sugar issues. All right. Emotionally, I really, really want to say to you, really take and own the fact that if you need to make some dietary changes, that you're doing it for the well-being and benefit of you and your baby. And it's one of those life-changing opportunities sometimes to really change how you're living, how your health is. So it's about taking and embracing it for what it is. And you will find that if you do that and you start reading and researching and looking for different meals and menus, that you'll find that that goes better. And your family, if they're used to more sugar treats and that, they're also going to have to learn, because it's very difficult to feed a family everything and then you not have any of it. So it's a great idea to start helping everybody to want to do better. All right, let's see. Where am I at here? Did that. Solution, feed them. A true gestational baby often will come into the world with excess fluid in their body, so they'll look a little bigger, if you will, and weigh a little more. And when that happens, they pee off a lot of that fluid in the first week, and their weight can go from, say, 10 pounds to 9 pounds over the week, and everybody has a fit. Well, if that's the case, but the baby's been nursing well, peeing well, pooping well, then weights just need to be watched from the 1 week to the 3 week time to make sure that the baby is coming up, because it's very common with these babies to pee a lot of fluid off, so they look like their body weight has gone down more than it truly has. It's just been a lot of excess fluid. All right, let me go back and start looking at comments and questions. Oh dear. Have any of you had babies that were over 10 pounds? All right, let me go back, find your original questions. My goodness, I love it. All right, here we go. Let's see. Do you think it's necessary to take the glucose test, or what are your thoughts on it? I know my midwife has a more natural one. So I look at the risk factors of the individual. Do they have family history? Have they had big babies? Is this something that would benefit us to know that? But I can tell you, in my career, I have not ordered an outside test in years, okay? I do home monitoring and challenge tests here, and risk basis and what I see in care. Now, those are the clients that I have. It may be in another practice that may be different, because everywhere we live, there's different diets, different lifestyles, and etc. So each midwife has to walk with that. So I'm not keen on that glucose test, because I don't think it gives us nearly the amount of information as testing at home, keeping a diet sheet, because then you become capable of seeing what foods are changing that blood sugar, which means then you have the feedback instead of just some test being done on you that says, oh, you're fine. It's like, well, maybe you are and maybe you're not, right? So that's my view on that. The fresh test is something that many midwives are using now, which I think sounds really wonderful. Do you know of any supplements that can help? Okay, so we talked about that. Let's see. I'm pregnant with third baby. First two babies, I failed the 1 hour but passed the third. This is my first home birth, and I get to do a breakfast instead, then do labs. If I fail, then I do the 3-hour syrup. Yeah, that seems, that's one midwife's way of feeling like there's a good balance, a good compromise, right? And the breakfast is common in midwifery care, that we want you to eat a syrupy pancake breakfast, right? Make sure you eat some eggs with it. Is that going to throw the test off? Well, it's not going to throw it off unless there's unless if it's really a problem, it's not going to throw it off. Okay? And the question is, why were you failing your first tests? Because something there was causing you to have a difficult time monitoring those sugars. But then when you did the 3-hour, by that point, your body was starting to be able to regulate it by that point. So make sure you eat lots of good protein the couple of days before, and that morning when you do your breakfast and then you go in and you have your blood drawn, see what happens. Hopefully it'll be nice and good. And like I said, have some eggs with your pancakes and syrup and whatever else she's asked you to do. But that's common. There's also the jelly bean. You know, we used to say 16 jelly beans, or there were a few other things that we've used through the year. Wow, it's amazing how diet can help almost anything. Love the Whole30. Yeah, it can. It can really do a lot of good things, digestion and everything else. What can you do to make the yeast infections better? How do you know you have a yeast infection? So, if you've ever had one, you know you have it. Yeast infections vaginally are itchy like crazy, and they are relentless. And often when you lay down to go to bed at night is really when you notice a lot of that itch, or you have a white, like cheesy discharge. It's not usually smelly necessarily. It can smell a little bit, but it's not a lot. And so if you have one, you will know it. All right, so not to worry about that. It's uncommon that you wouldn't. And like I said, if they're real mild, then using a hydrogen peroxide and water 50-50 mix and just squirting it up inside morning and night usually will take care of that if it's mild, along with taking some probiotics. You can put a probiotic up inside as well. And I talked about garlic. Now, some people like the garlic. You take the peeling off the garlic. Do not chop it. Talking is good. And you take like a thread, wrap it around it nice and tight, tie it around there and kind of sit it up inside your vagina. And then in the morning, you just pull it out. Now, it's helpful if you dip it in some olive oil first because it can feel a little burny. The other way that people have done it is to make a good garlic oil, meaning taking like a couple cloves and mincing them up and putting it into garlic oil and letting that sit overnight, and then straining the garlic off and then soaking a tampon in it, putting the tampon up inside for the night, and then in the morning taking it out. And many times that's easier on the tissues. It doesn't burn nearly as much, but some people, they're good for the, I'm just going to get it gone. But if that doesn't work over the course of 3 to 5 days, that things haven't gotten solved, then head for the monostat and just deal with it, okay? All right, let's see what else we got. How do you use the garlic at night, which I just told you, a whole card. Okay, fabulous. Some people have poked a needle into it to sew the thread to it. I don't recommend that because if that oil starts leaking out, it is hard to tolerate. What are your thoughts on natural sweeteners like stevia? I like stevia. Stevia is a natural sweetener. Just make sure it's a good quality. And stevia actually encourages good pancreas function as far as an herb goes. So it's a good sweetener to use in your teas and cereals and things like that. Much better than using any other substitute. It's either got to be sugar, honey, agave is okay, coconut sugar, or stevia is usually my preference. Now, stevia is really hard to be able to cook with. I never found it super good to be able to make like baked goods and cookies and things like that because the flavor in that quantity is just too strong. Xylitol is great. So those are some of the natural ones, but I do like stevia. All right, let's see. Here's another one. Will you save these lives? I missed the conversation about the yeast infection. My phone died. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, they're always saved for 24 hours on Instagram. And if you go to Facebook, and I know some of you don't have Facebook accounts. On Instagram, they won't let us, to my knowledge, save it for long periods of time. So they are saved on my Facebook page, which is Natural Childbirth 101, and you can go over there, and they're on there, all the ones from the beginning to the end, as far as I know. They're all there. And many of them are uploaded to YouTube as well. The only thing you have to do is put in natural child and separate word birth 101. Somehow somebody has the combined word already, and you can go there, but not all of them are up there. As many as I can get up there are. Let's see, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. I've had a few miscarriages. I'm really hoping to reverse a lot of my symptoms with diet. Do you have a favorite book or diet you recommend for thyroid? You know, I don't have a favorite book. I think that with thyroid, especially with Hashimoto's, you want to stimulate, you know, a good immune function. So I think to be able to really look at those good supplements that you can take in pregnancy that stimulate good anti-inflammatory. So your antioxidants, I think, are really good. I think vitamin C is really good. Your B vitamins, again, because B vitamins are not just for neurological growth, but it's also for immune system. And so making sure that that immune system is really nourished. I think having lemon in water is always good for getting rid of certain inflammatory type things. And frankly, I'd have to do some more research on Hashimoto's to, not that I haven't had some clients with it, but to give you some really good meaty things on that one, I'd have to do that. Now, if you'll email me at kalimjoymidwife@gmail.com, I will go and look up a few things and see if we can kind of learn together, right? All right, let's see. TTC, try to conceive. Oh, I gotcha. All right. Yeah, favorite book or diet you recommend while you're trying to conceive? Well, on Hashimoto's, no. On general, yes. You know, I would say that looking at being on a really good, clean diet is really important. And the less inflammation, the better that process is going to work for you. So I would look at diets like the Whole30, like the Paleos, and really fine-tune it to get away from a lot of the grains. The grains are very inflammatory. And, you know, I know for myself, for the most part, I'm gluten-free, not 100%, but for the most part. But I tend to substitute some of the corn for it, and that's not a whole lot better some days. So that's one thing that I would do, is eliminate as much inflammatory type things as you can when you get ready to conceive. I'm sorry I came in late, but what do you recommend for a lactation supplement and when to start taking? So I have a lactation like tincture that I make up. It's a lot like the one by, I think it's Mother Love. Anyway, it has fenugreek. Now, there's a lot of talk about fenugreek nowadays, so you can leave fenugreek out if you want to. But there are some new ones on the market. I cannot tell you what they are because I was just exposed to them. And they have shatavari in them. They have your hops and fennel and marshmallow root. And I love marshmallow root. I love blessed thistle. I love fennel. And like I said, the shatavari has been a newer one for me. It's part of Ayurvedic medicine, which is not something I'm as familiar with, but I've had more and more people using that for conception as well as for milk production. So you might want to take a look at that. Now, when to start it? Well, it depends on what your circumstances have been. if you're one that has had milk supply issues in the past, I usually start those milk herbs by day 2 or 3, and I start them pumping by day 3 as well, because in the first, say, 10 days or so, and especially in those first 3 to 5 days, the body is listening to all of the spikes of prolactin that are going on, and it's laying down all these wonderful receptors for those prolactins. And if you don't get enough of them in the beginning, it's hard to make it up. So I love going, you know what, if we have to reduce supply, I'd rather reduce supply if you've had supply issues in the past. So now let's nurse the baby, let's put that pump on for 10 minutes, and let's get as much milk wanting to come in and getting that supply to be as good as possible. So I'll usually start those herbs by 2 to 3 days if I know there's been milk supply issues in the past. But consider looking at some of these newer products that are out there, and I think one of them has kind of like a 3-bottle system. Gosh, I'm so sorry I can't remember the name of it, but it's newer. If anybody's seen it, you know, please put it on the thread. All right, let's see what else we got. Great advice. I decided to go gluten-free and as much dairy-free as I can and paleo Whole30. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a good one. The ultimate portion fix is a good lifestyle diet. I got pregnant first try. Right on. And that helps tremendously, you know. Our bodies want to be balanced. They want to be in harmony with us. And when we are able to give them what they need, they're usually willing to give us what we want. Now, there's some extenuating circumstances to that. Some people have a really hard time conceiving. I was one of them. That was difficult for me. And I can look back now and I can go, oh, I think I was deficient in this and this. But I didn't know that then. I wasn't a midwife then. And there was a lot about hormones, and I just went to my doctor and he did a few tests and he said, well, there's nothing I should see. Well, now I look back and I go, oh, I was deficient in this and this. No wonder I had a hard time conceiving. So it's like it's like going to a pediatrician and asking the pediatrician to help you with breastfeeding. If they have not taken breastfeeding classes and are really geared to that, that's not their job. Okay, so my OB at the time, because midwifery was not as readily available in California at that time, you know, that's all they knew how to do, which was just run some tests, and the tests look okay, well, then I guess it's all right. It'll happen. Well, you know, it didn't. All right, let's see. Would you mind if emailed you regarding the herbs and supplements to support a supply? This is my first, and I have had a breast reduction, so I'm just wanting to come prepared. You bet. Yep. Just type in, let's see, I did this last week. Actually, one of you I know can do it. Kaleem Joy, KALEEMJOY, midwife @gmail.com. And I'll say it again if anybody can't type that in. I know I should be able to type it in, but I still don't understand how. I'm working it. Oh, comment. Wait. Turn on. Nope. Can't do it there. All right. One of you are going to have to do it. There you go. All right. Thank you. I don't know who all of you are with your signature names. Some of you I know who you are. Some of you I don't. There we go. It's in there plenty. Yes. Happy to do that. Okay. So we are coming to our close. Any last minute questions real quick? And hopefully you will tell others about things like this, because the more you understand, the more you can advocate for yourself, the more you have that ability to be able to make choices and decisions based on your own care and not on just routines. And when you can do that, you take ownership, you become empowered. And I think that's why you're here listening to me. It's because you want to know, you want to learn, you're eager to become really empowered and take that ownership for what your process is going to be. And there's a lot more people out there. So please share it as much as you possibly can. I'm currently writing the booklet for the main series, and as soon as the booklet is done, we should be able to get it up online. So then you will have access to an entirely series for pregnancy and birth and partners and parenting and postpartum, all the P's, breastfeeding and the whole bit. And that series will be up where you'll have access to it and can take that and see what it is. I'm also going to be doing master classes, and master classes will be setting up a time where we'll be together either for a half or a full day, and we're going to go through what is pregnancy to help you become the best person that you are, as well as to become the best birth giver and the best parent. And I'm super excited about those. So those are coming up this year, and it should be really, really a fun thing to do. So thank you everybody for coming on tonight. I know many of you are just now signing on, and I feel so sad that I didn't get to see you longer, but you can go back and rewatch the recorded one on the Instagram as well as on Facebook. Please feel free on Facebook to go over there. If you don't have a Facebook account, make a Facebook account just to watch it. All right, you don't have to share it with anybody. You don't have to have anybody on your account, but just go and do that. You're 6 months pregnant, and the information has been so helpful. I'm so glad. I want you to know it means everything to me to know that I'm making a difference, because this project of getting this main series up and running has been 2 years, and it's had to be everything inside of me that coming on and seeing you on Wednesday nights is what spurs me on, that this is important, that there is a need for it, and that it can really make a difference. And that's what I want. I want to make a difference in as many people's lives as I can to help you have the best of whatever that best is for you. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. All right, so tonight, whether you've had children or whether you haven't, go in, hug your children. And if you haven't had a child yet, imagine hugging one. Imagine how warm and wonderful that would feel, how delightful it will feel to hug and hold and just kiss and love that child. And if you have them, just imagine how wonderful it is to have them in your life. Go in, hug your kids, tell them you love them. Tell them they're amazing and that they can do anything that they set their minds to. Thanks so much for watching tonight, and I'm looking forward to next week. If you have any ideas, please shoot them off to me either in Messenger, or you can certainly send them off to the email, and I'm happy to talk about something that's of interest to you. Otherwise, we'll see you next Wednesday night at 7. Have a great week. Stay well. Go out and play in the sun. All right? Take care. Bye.